Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Showtime with Jordan Van Haslow and Friends. Today, I have a very, very new friend with us today, someone who I'm so excited to really get an opportunity to chat with and get to know. We have quite a few people in common, and apparently everybody in the world knows this man. And so I'm glad that I get the opportunity to get to know him as well. Larry Carroll, thank you so much for joining me today, Larry.
My pleasure, Jordan. Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you what I've been asking everybody over the last few weeks. How have you spent your spring break?
I got to tell you, I mean, notwithstanding all of the tragedy that has taken place in the lives and the families of people around the world, notwithstanding the failure of leadership that's taken place here in the United States, I have had a wonderful time. I mean, really, of course, I am not burdened by a lot of the responsibilities that go along with, day-to-day work. I mean, I'm supposed to be retired. The retirement part isn't working out very well because I find that I'm doing as much, if not more, than I did, at the height of my career. But I've really enjoyed it. I've gotten a chance to really enjoy home and family, and it's given space for more creativity. And, the pause in the normal, helter-skelter of being a functionary in a busy world has given an opportunity to do things I would not ordinarily have done, like paint my bedroom, like resurface the garage, like, I've tuned my listening room. I'm an audiophile.
Okay.
I never had a chance to really sit down and do those things and enjoy them the way I have. To write, to.
That's so interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but wait, so you call it a listening room? Because that's so interesting. Because most people I know who have like a room that's dedicated to whether it's live music or entertainment, it's like the music room. But that's interesting. It's the listening room.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long story that goes behind this, but since college and a business that my roommate and I started while in college, I have been one whose ears really operate my whole neural network. And even in the news business, the use of music to tell stories was something I was dedicated to doing and to developing and to perfecting. Mm-hmm. And that required a real appreciation of music and just to be able to sit in a room and listen. I mean, I'm still looking in Las Vegas for the perfect listening environment in a performance space,
Yeah.
where the sound is just there and it's absolutely correct and it envelops and involves you as you're listening. And so, yeah, it's also a screening room. I've got a great big screen and whatnot and all kinds of speakers, but just to sit there and listen, that's why I call it listening room.
I think that's wonderful.
It's a joy. It's a real joy.
That's awesome. And I think it's so interesting. You talk about like Las Vegas not having like a true listening room. So I'm still relatively new to Vegas, right? I came to Vegas in October of last year, to do the show. And it's been really interesting, having spent most of my career in New York and like LA and and each city has its own thing, but like in New York, you have a lot of like listening rooms. There's people are like here to just enjoy the music, enjoy and suck it all in. Yeah. Whereas Vegas is different than that. And so yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I know I've been here 9 years now, and I haven't seen everything yet. And I if somebody knows of a space like the one that Jordan and I are talking about right now.
Do you think that there's
kindred spirits immediately?
Right? Do you think that there's a place for that though? Because I also find that the audience in LA or in Vegas is different, right? Like I feel that in Vegas it's about not just the show, but I feel that in Vegas entertainment and going out for entertainment is really a social thing. So it's not like, oh my goodness, my favorite artist, musician, whatever is here, and I just want to soak it all in. It's like, oh my goodness, all my friends, we're all going to get together and we're going to socialize. We're going to say hi, and we know the singer, and we're going to go here and we're going to order drinks. And like it feels like it's more of
There's more.
Like, do you think that there's a space for a true listening room in Vegas?
I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And,
Okay.
if there are fanatics like me, for example, who are out to find that space, I mean, that's a wonderful reason for people to come together. And I think it would be wonderfully fulfilling for an artist to perform in that kind of an environment.
Yeah.
Because you'll get people who are there to listen to that performance, to absorb every aspect of it in a way that you can't if there are people talking over here and laughing over there and
Yeah.
drinks into this and that and all the various influences that come into an environment. I mean, some of the best performers I've seen here, I've seen in lounges.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's so much else going on that's distracting in a lounge that you wish you could just sit in a room that you serve, all right, and maybe yes, have a view of the strip, but have a perfected, tuned listening environment where you could really appreciate the work that these artists have put into creating a moment for you, okay? And I just believe that would be fulfilling for an audience and fulfilling for the performers and the artists as well.
Did you have a chance to visit the Vegas room before it opened, like right before the shutdown? Lisa invited me. We went to see Brent Barrett, the Broadway guy, who he opened up the room. And I think that like some folks in town have been doing, oh my goodness, I can't think of her name. But I think some people have been doing some virtual stuff from there, but it opened as like a traditional cabaret room. And like, there was nothing else like it in town. And I thought it was so wonderful, but it also kind of felt so weird because it felt so un-Vegas.
Yeah. And he's talking, by the way, about Lisa Gay, who, if you have not heard or enjoyed a performance by Lisa, you've really missed something. And Lisa's a mutual dear friend of ours, and who would just thrive in an environment like that, because even, in the loud, chatty places that are typical performance environments here, Lisa is one of those performers who will captivate you and just draw you into her
orbit.
Wonderful, comfortable, happy, resonant environment. But yeah.
You've always worked in media, but have you ever been are you a musician as well? Are you like a closet crooner, or are you a...
I have been guilty of that. I had an experience, in the early 70s here in Las Vegas with a group called the Doodletown Pipers. I'm happy to say that, some of the folks who were in the Doodletown Pipers at that time I still consider, dear friends and people who I respect in the business. But I got involved with them because they were shooting a TV special on the campus of the college that I was attending. And because I was news director of the radio station there, the university figured, okay, well, he can work with these production people, fell in love with them, and, ended up here in Vegas with them. And I had to come to a crossroads saying, well, should I pursue this as a career? Or do I want to eat? Eating and, raising a family and doing so in a less threatening economic environment was probably the better thing to do. And I'm glad that I made that decision. But yeah, I've been a tap dancer. I have sung all of my life, and everything from opera to R&B and whatnot. And if you drop into the Italian American club at the wrong night, maybe me standing up and singing even now. I've done a lot of singing in church, and at one point I decided that that's the only place I really wanted to sing.
This church. Well, I'm curious, the Doodletown Pipers, it's such a vivid name. So I'm picturing were they like a barbershop quintet? Were they like, they sound like they could do like a bunch of it.
They were a pop group that debuted on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour.
Okay.
If you can go back that far. And there are a number of groups that were spawned at that time. I mean, our principal competition was a group called Up With People. And, we thought they were way too
I know Up With People.
Yeah. And Kenny Rogers in the first edition got their start on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. But they came out of that circumstance and, became a real performing and recording group. And and at the time that I met them, did 6 TV specials and did pop music. The MacArthur's Park and all the stuff that was
Yeah.
Eli's Coming and those kinds of renditions, and held forth in the lounge at the then Frontier Hotel, which was a happening spot. So that was my first exposure really to Las Vegas. And I had a nascent radio career at that time. And shortly thereafter, got into radio, which was as much an outgrowth of my performance, proclivity, as it was to my commitment to social justice. My teenage years were spent with my parents on picket lines in Chicago, and watching people get arrested protesting segregated schools and public accommodations and all manner of police brutality and whatnot. It's kind of familiar issues today.
Everything
back in
old
the early
is
60s.
new again.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad was executive vice president of one of the first community-based grassroots civil rights organizations, which, along with other organizations on the south side of Chicago, came together.
Where did you grow up exactly? I grew up in Chicago as well.
Did you?
Where exactly did you grow up? Yeah.
63rd and Rhodes, which was
Okay.
right between Cottage Grove on the east and what was then South Park, later became King Drive.
Kings Drive, yeah.
L train going over about a half a block north of us. And it was the demilitarized zone between the Blackstone Rangers at the time and the Disciples, which, and that in itself made growing up an experience. But mom and dad were thoroughly involved in the movement. And, because the Woodlawn, it was West Woodlawn where we lived, the Woodlawn organization was one of the organizations that came together to create Operation Breadbasket. And you remember SCLC, Operation Breadbasket, and Jesse Jackson. Well, I've known Jesse since I was, 13, 14 years old. And you may have read in my bio that I'm probably the only person who's worked in the press offices of both Jesse Jackson and Richard
Nixon. Yeah, let's talk
I
about
didn't
that
see
at
any
some point.
common people in any of those groups. But out of that, really, I developed my commitment to the use of media to move messages that help inform Americans about the truth of their circumstances so that they could make the important decisions about their lives and communities.
So was your goal to be was your goal back then to be like the next Walter Cronkite? Or because it sounds like you came to media, like a lot of people come to media, right, because they just like seeing themselves and talking about themselves.
That wasn't me at all. No, it wasn't about a personality. It was about an institution. The institution being journalism in America, which is a unique force and a unique institution anywhere in the world. It was what made the civil rights movement happen, because if people had not been able to witness the dogs and the fire hoses and the marches and the freedom riders' stories that captivated the attention and the imaginations of Americans at that time, the political will would not have been developed to create the changes that, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and all of that legislation that took place in the mid-60s generated. And it proved to me how important that is. And that's what I wanted to be a part of. It was, and I spent a whole lot of time from 1968 until 2008 broadcasting. That's why I did it. I didn't do it because I thought my voice was wonderful, or thought I looked cute, or thought I could get chicks or good seats at restaurants. I did it, and much of the time sacrificially, because I thought that I could be a force to help do what people in a representative republic need to have done for them, which is give them good information upon which they can base their decisions about their lives and communities, and indeed about the world. To connect us to one another, and to give us a sense of what our broader communities are really about. It was tremendously fulfilling. There's no better use of a liberal arts education than being a journalist in the United States of America or representing the United States of America.
So at that point, knowing that like, okay, this is what I want to do, this is what made you go to California, say, versus going to school in New York, right? Because you want to be in media. I want to.
Let me explain something to you, Jordan. I lived in Chicago. What do you think it would take to get somebody to move from Chicago to sunny Southern California? Nothing, okay? But in all honesty and reality, I was the beneficiary of a whole bunch of circumstances that accrued to my benefit over which I had no control whatsoever. I was blessed resoundingly a number of times in a row, even until today. I came to California in 1967 because my godfather was a guidance system designer for the aerospace division of Hughes Aircraft Corporation. Brilliant man, David Wooldridge. And he knew, and at that time, I had been working in the audiovisual department at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Chicago as my after-school job. So I loved the emergence of videotape. Imagine that, being able to record video.
Yeah.
And certainly projection systems and sound support. And I was learning all about circuitry, and I'm soldering this. And so I had a great teacher in that environment. And he says, well, if you're really interested in all that, I bet you there's an apprenticeship program at Hughes that you would qualify for. Why don't you come on out and I'll help you get into it. Well, I got to California, discovered I had to be 18 years old, and I was only 16 in order to get into one of those programs. And
had you graduated high school already? Like, had you graduated earlier?
This was 67. I didn't graduate until, the most important year in the 20th century to me, which was 1968. Most important year in my life until this one.
Until 2020, right? And then all of a sudden, like.
I mean, and you'll see all kinds of comparisons drawn between, the circumstances of 1968 and those of 2020, but came to California and couldn't get that job and ended up looking for everything from, if I could spin a sign on a corner like they do today, I'd have been doing that. I tried to get a job as a busboy at Bob's Big Boy. They wouldn't hire me for that, and ended up thinking, well, I've been in California now for 3 weeks and I haven't found anything, and I'm tired, and I can drive my godfather's car. I have not even seen the water yet. Let me go out to Santa Monica Beach, see what that's like. Throw out a towel on Santa Monica Beach about 10 o'clock in the morning. And about 20 minutes after I lay down this towel, this big, huge psychedelic truck painted with all kinds of, 67 type, love. It was at the Year of Love, designs on the side of the truck, rolls out onto the sand. Bunch of guys jump out. They start unloading a bunch of stuff, and I'm looking, and it's television cameras, and they're putting what looks like a dance floor out on the sand, and lights and sound support equipment and whatnot. So I drag my little towel a little closer to this because it's very interesting. Hell, I'm in Hollywood. This looks like it might be a TV show. Turns out it was a show called Groovy. And this was the first day of production of this show. It was a teeny bopper rock and roll show hosted by a guy named Mike Blodgett, who came out in deck shoes and, swimming trunks and a t-shirt. And pretty soon they start canvassing the people on the beach. Do you want to dance? One day we're doing a TV show. You want to dance?
Like, sure.
So I danced on 2 shows that day. They packed all the stuff, rolled off the beach. I'm going, wow, that was kind of cool. I think I must have won a pair of Sansa slacks or something. And so the next day I wake up, I'm going, I think I'm going to go out there again. That was kind of fun. I go out there and I dance on another show. And by this time I figured out who the director is and who the producer is, who the APs are, who the PAs are. And, because they're canvassing the beach, and I walk up to the producer. His name was Yale Farrar. And I said, excuse me, sir, my name's Larry Carroll. And you've probably noticed I've danced on your first 3 shows. You're probably tired of seeing me. But if there's anything I can do to help, I'm here at the beach. I have nothing to do. And this is fascinating. If you need any help, I'm here. So I ran for hot dogs and a stick and orange Julius's, and, held a microphone, while somebody was doing something, and, helped them change. This is the attitude of the dance floor. By the end of the day, I'd gotten to know everybody, and Yale Farrar offered me a job as an associate producer on the show. I was in heaven. We shot 2 shows a day, 3 days a week for the rest of that summer. I was late going back to my senior year in high school in Chicago because I was working Groovy on the weekdays, and on the weekends I was a PA, production assistant, on a live 90-minute show called Boss City at KHJ-TV Channel 9 in Los Angeles. Do you know I was in heaven, dude?
I'm sure you were. And I think it's amazing that you like went back to Chicago, because a lot of people like might have said like, you know what, screw, like I'm going to school so I can work, and now I'm a producer in Hollywood.
Yeah. No, I have more sense than that. I have better sense than that. Here I am hanging out with Sonny and Cher and the Rolling Stones and Paul Revere and the Raiders and this one and that one who were coming on live, and this was cool. But the ethos of my family is get educated, period. And in fact, a year later, when I came back to California after having graduated, after the police riots in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention, and that's a whole story I'll tell you. I came back to KHJ Channel 9, back to the production office of Groovy and Boss City, and I knocked on the door, and it was open, and I pushed the door open, and there was nobody in there but Yale Farrar. And Yale was packing his desk into boxes. This was his last day, and he was dejected. He was frustrated. He was not angry, but he was really on edge. And he says, God, kid, I'm so glad you walked in here. Let me tell you something right now, and this is for your life. Do not get involved in this business. Do not do that. I mean, I know you had fun and you were a great help to me, and I know that, you really got, ambitions in this area, but man, do not do this. Please, anything you do, whatever, if anything you learn from me, please follow me on this. I'm out of this. It's really wrecked my life, and I've got to do something else. He turned out that he went into finance, and I think he became a financial, whiz. He was a stockbroker or something. He went in there.
And then he came back and started investing in the business again.
I don't know about that. But it was one of those moments, and obviously I didn't follow Yale's advice. I became news director, program director of the college radio station, formed my own production company. That's how I got involved with the Doodletown Pipers. I became Jesse Jackson's first West Coast press secretary at that time. And then...
and how did that happen? Like, as this college student, like, how did that...
Well, again, starting at age 13, 14, Dad's involved with, the Woodlawn organization and then Operation Breadbasket. I began singing in the Operation Breadbasket choir, which was a big deal, fantastic people in that. Ben Branch and his combo played every Saturday morning, first at Parkway Gardens and then at a big theater down on 79th and Halsted. 5,000 people every Saturday morning. It was a huge and wonderful moment of the movement in Chicago and making a difference. And as I got older and was in high school and got involved in the audiovisual end, I continued to sing in the choir, but then got attracted to the SCLC audio staff, Southern Christian Leadership Conference audio. And we would travel behind Reverend Jackson and on a couple of occasions, Dr. King, Ralph David Abernathy, C.T. Vivian, some of the superstars of the civil rights movement, either as a member of the choir or as a member of the audio staff, engineering the radio broadcasts and the recordings and whatnot. Fascinating work. I mean, I was totally consumed by it. And, I got to sit with Reverend Jackson on a number of occasions. And, he knew that I had gone to high school at the University of Chicago and that I had a future. And he says, let me tell you what you need to do. I says, I'm happy to hear any advice you might give. He says, economics, do business and or economics. And so that when I came to California to go to college, that was my major at Pomona College in Claremont, California, was economics. And that's where my degree is. And I says, well, do you plan to come out to California at all? He says, well, yeah, it's possible. It's anything's possible. I says, well, I'll tell you what, when you get there, I'll do for you there what I've done for you here. And he says, well, you'll be my press secretary? I said, sure. Yeah. And I
That's it.
mean, that led to some fascinating experiences, absolutely fascinating experiences.
So how does one go from being the press secretary to Jesse Jackson to then being the press secretary to Richard Nixon?
Oh, wow. There's some space in there. I produced the Operation Breadbasket radio broadcast in Los Angeles. The meeting took place at the Elks Hall on Central Avenue. And there was a radio station that few people knew at the time was owned and operated by an African-American man, a black man named John Lamar Hill. It was KJLH, still is KJLH, one of the most important and high quality radio stations in Los Angeles even today. John Lamar Hill owned the Angelus Funeral Home. And so Jesse convinced John Lamar Hill that he needed to broadcast the Operation Breadbasket weekly community meetings. And so just as it had in Chicago, it fell to me to record those meetings, which were frequently 3 hours long, and then overnight, edit them down to a 1-hour arable broadcast for KJLH radio on Sunday afternoon. And at some point in that relationship, I believe that Jesse prevailed upon John Hill to make me a staff member at KJLH rather than just doing this for free. And he had a one-man news department. And there was a great guy who was doing it, a guy named Bill Moreland, white guy, really bright, funny. And his mission at KJLH, which was an automated radio station, all the big tape machines, and they all played elevator music. Once an hour, Bill would get to go on the air and read the Associated Press radio wire. That's it. That was the whole deal. And so Bill and I became fast friends. We were roommates for a while because I was traveling back and forth from Claremont, where I was going to school, and the Crenshaw district. Because the place was 3847 Crenshaw Boulevard, right window on the world of South LA. And we decided at these volatile times in 1970, 71, Angela Davis, Black Panther Party, Huey Newton, et cetera, that we needed to play a role in informing the local community. And and as we were broadcasting the breadbasket meetings, it soon became known in the community, okay, this is a source of some community information and news. And so Bill and I decided we would be that. And we stopped reading the AP radio wire and started writing and producing our own news broadcasts. And people would come up to the window on Crenshaw Boulevard just to say hi and press their noses against the window. And suddenly there was something going on at KJLH that had never gone on there before. It made John Lamar Hill a little uneasy. And at the end of a year of broadcasting there, we were doing some pretty creative stuff. We were interviewing people live on the air. We were doing taped interviews and editing them, putting together sweet little newscasts and whatnot. And a news director at KISS Radio, KIIS, heard me and called me and says, I really am impressed with the kind of news production you guys are doing. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested in coming to work for KISS. Now understand, KJLH at the time didn't really register in the ratings.
Right.
We were heard in barbershops where there was no business, or in elevators where sometimes there were plenty of business. KISS Radio was the number 2, number 3 radio station in Los Angeles at that time. And so he didn't get the words out of my mouth before I said, where do I show up? Went and worked for KISS. It was my first major radio experience doing evening drive time news. A year later, it got sold and they cut out news after 6 p.m. and they fired my boss, but they continued to hire me to do news on the weekends. And that lasted about 3 or 4 months. And then they decided they were going to cut out news on the weekends. This is, when you talk about the dumbing down of America,
Yeah.
That's where I began to picture it happening, when people were no longer interested in spending money to give people information.
Right.
That's another master class right there. But I went I went back to my dorm room in Claremont, and I was driving a 1971 Dodge Challenger, vitamin C orange, dual black racing stripes, 340 4-barrel, tartan plaid interior, lots of noise. I'd remodeled my dorm room. I had the Ames chair. I had the big wheels. I had the Boss Pro 4A
You were
headphones.
like,
And I had a private phone line. I'm balling, okay? And so now this is my first Friday night when I'm not working at KISS Radio. And I said, I'm just going to celebrate. I got myself a big jug of Almaden wine and a paper cup. I put those headphones on and I'm rocking out. Okay, nobody can hear what's going on between my ears but me. And about an hour into this nirvana, the light on my private line starts ringing. It starts flashing. So I take off my headphones, and lo and behold, the phone's ringing. I take off my phones, get out of the Ames chair, walk over to the phone, pick it up. Carroll here. Is this Lawrence Carroll? Yes. This is Herb Klein at the White House Office of Communications. Do you mind if we speak? I said, you got to be kidding. I am not stupid. Try another phone line, and I hung up on him. I got back to my Ames chair, picked up my plastic paper cup, put the headphones on, and I went back to rocket. About 10 minutes later, the lights flash, and again, I take off the headphones, I go over there, and I pick up the phone, and and the guy says, I'm trying to reach Lawrence Carroll. I'm calling from the White House. This is Herb Klein, and I thought I called this number before. Did I talk to you? I says, yeah, I think you did, and you said you were like with the White House or something, and I'm not believing it now either. So try to bother somebody else right now, okay? Hung up the phone again. Predictably, he calls again, and I say, okay, fine. I'll listen to this guy. And he goes on to tell me that they understand that I'm available, and they have a position available with the White House Office of Communications, and they'd very much like to interview me. I'm going, seriously, dude? And he said, I'm wondering if you'd be free to come down to our facility in Marina Del Rey on Monday. We'd love to talk to you. And so I made a date to drive 35, 40 miles down to the Marina Del Rey on Monday to meet this guy whose name was Lynn Nofziger. And if you're a student of Watergate, you'll remember that name as being one of the unindicted co-conspirators in the Watergate thing. Well, this guy was kind of standing on both sides of a big chasm. One was the committee to re-elect Nixon, and the other was the White House Office of Communications. And the White House Office of Communications needed a director of broadcast news bureau relations for the state of California. And they'd heard that I was available and would I come and work for the White House. The first thing I did, Jordan, was call my mama. Mom, I know it's late there, but she's in Chicago. I says, but I just got a call from a guy claiming to be, from the White House, from the Nixon White House, offering me a job. I know my inclination is to say, forget this noise. I'm not going there. These people are the worst of the worst, and non-cooperation with evil is just as much a moral obligation as cooperation with good. And she says, well, have an open mind.
But it's the White House.
Yeah. She says, well, have an open mind, son. Okay, I'll let you know what happens. And so it got down to.
I kind of wonder. I've been actually wondering if those are like a lot of those conversations have happened over the last 4 years with people like, oh, he wants you to come work, and it's like they call you, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm sure they have. I'm not so sure because from the folks I've seen hired by the current White House, I haven't seen a lot of thought having been put into who these people are. What they can really do and what they're really all about, maybe wanting a check.
But I digress.
15 minutes of fame, whatever have you. aside from the darkest of motivations, and again, that's another master class. But make a long story short, I took the job because it paid more than what Kiss Radio was paying me at the time. And I says, okay, I'm going to have an open mind. I'm going to try to be the voice of truth, justice, and freedom in this group of people. And that turned out to be one of the most difficult things I had ever done, and maybe have ever done. I saw things that were unbelievable. I saw things that later became news stories, because my next major broadcast assignment was at the ABC station, KABC TV, Channel 7 Eyewitness News in Los Angeles. And one of my first stories from them was the story of what happened when Nixon mined Haiphong Harbor, and the bogus operation that was run literally out of my office to go through every phone book they could find and choose names at random and send telegrams to the White House in the names of people who had no idea that their names were being used to support the president's initiative to mine Haiphong Harbor. Many experiences like that.
But what's amazing is that it didn't so after having explored that, did that make you kind of say like, okay, now I definitely have to go back into broadcasting because this is the kind of stuff that I want to explore? And the only reason I asked that, I have a friend who always worked as a booker in news. And her last job was working as a booker, as like the news booker for a talk show that's still actually a talk show now. And just kind of like a lot of the things that happened during her tenure there kind of made her say, you know what, screw this. I hate the news. I hate broadcast. Now she like works for like an antiques gallery.
Well, I mean, the thing, and I can understand that, being a frustrating position, but at the same time, but you're right. And again, one of those, God will open doors that can't be closed, and will close doors that can't be opened. He continued to open doors for me, to the point where at the time that I finally walked out of the White House job in a spat with Lynn Nofziger, having come in on a Saturday because there was a lot to be done legitimately, and I decided to take a Saturday and come on down to the office. And we had an argument because my girlfriend had sewn a peace symbol patch on my jeans, which had a hole in them. And he called me down to his office to ask me what that shit was on my leg. I'll make a long story short and say that did not end well. And remarkably, at that moment, the guy who had been my news director at KISS Radio had become news director at XPRS Radio out of Rosarita, Baja California, 50,000 year channel. It was Wolfman Jack station. It was huge. You could be heard up and down the Pacific coast to Alaska, and playing R&B. And he made me his assistant news director, and I became West Coast bureau chief for the Mutual Black Network. And I did morning drive time news, and I was so happy to be doing that and serving again. Yeah, it's not about the job. It's about serving. That's the heritage that my parents had given me. That's the motivation that they had instilled in me, that what you do has to constitute service to somebody, has to constitute service to the people, whether it's your people, your African-American people, or your American people, or the people of the planet. You've got to leave behind a path of service.
Totally.
And that was the character of my service, was doing the news. So I was at XPRS, and in the course of that, and this is interesting, this is how good things come out of questionable things. I was still a part of the Black Republican community after having served the White House.
Okay.
So now I'm assistant news director at XPRS, and I got invited to a Black Republican reception back down on Crenshaw Boulevard. And there's we all got wine in our hands, and the lady says, well, I'm a palm reader. Can I read your palm? I said, sure. And so she's reading my palm and telling me I'm going to have 5 wives and, 6 children, and have a great career line and so forth and so on, and this, that, and the other. Now in my left ear, there are 2 guys sitting on a table and they're talking. And one of them is the only black reporter at the CBS station, then KNXT in Los Angeles, a guy named Jake Jacobs. And he's talking to a guy who's a producer of the morning show at KABC. And the guy at the morning show at KABC is telling Jake Jacobs, you know, we just lost our only black reporter, and you know they're looking for a black reporter. So, dude, I mean, if you run across somebody you think might be qualified for a position there at Channel 7, you know, just call me. And I said to the palm reader, I says, excuse me, I got to take my hand. Excuse me. And I said, hello, my name is Larry Carroll, and I just overheard you that's saying that there's an opening at Channel 7. He says, oh, sure, tell me. And we got in a conversation, the three of us. That following Monday morning, I was in the news director's office at KABC, and that's another masterclass story, but I ended up there for 17 years doing some of the most incredible work I could ever have imagined doing in my life. Golden Mics, Emmy nominations, everything that happened in, did I lose you?
I got you. You dropped out for a second. You said you're in the news director's office.
Yeah, and learning everything I could possibly learn about television and broadcasting and production. Did every job that there was to do in that news department, produced shows. I covered riots. I did documentaries on rats, on gangs, on redlining, on architecture, on every imaginable subject matter that would come across my table. As I said, it was the best possible use of a liberal arts education, all while trying to represent who I was, who we are, and giving people the important information they needed to make the critical decisions about their lives and communities. Had an amazing time there, and to, you know, wrap that part of it up, spent 17 years there, left in 1989 to start a news station. The KHJ that I had started at, doing Boss City and Groovy, had been purchased by Disney and turned into KCAL 9, KCAL TV. They wanted to do 3 hours of primetime news every night. They hired the #1 anchor from Channel 7 Eyewitness News, a fellow named Jerry Dunphy, a legendary figure in Los Angeles news. And 20 minutes after they signed Jerry, they called and signed me because Jerry told them to call Larry Carroll. I helped build that television station from nothing. The second person hired in that news department that existed, that still thrives today, now belongs to CBS. We had our 30th anniversary celebration this past March in Burbank. 200 people who are family, because we shared the experience of building the city on the hill, the city on a hill in local news for Los Angeles, and an example for how news should be done in cities across the United States. It was an amazing professional experience. Left there after the Rodney King riots, a year after the Rodney King riots, after I had testified before the U.S. Civil Rights Commission about, and the theme of it was discrimination in broadcasting. And I testified about how the weekends became the ghetto for Black broadcast journalists. And because try to find one on a primetime newscast sitting in the anchor chair made headlines, and I thought it would be probably the end of my career. But thankfully, it was what led me to probably the pinnacle of my professional experience as a broadcast journalist, and that was at NBC News as a network correspondent for Nightly News with Tom Brokaw and for the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric at the time, out of the Burbank Bureau, covered Denver to Honolulu, Alaska to Central America. It was a phenomenal experience. It was a consuming experience. I was on the road maybe 300 days a year, to the point where I'd wake up not knowing what hotel airport I was supposed to go to.
You have to like look at the stationery to figure out what town you're in, right?
You know, see what turn on the local news in the morning and find out, pre-dawn what city I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately burned me out. And the guy who'd been an executive producer at KCAL9, where we'd all had so much fun, Larry Perrett, had become the news director at KCBS TV. And I went there as the 5 o'clock evening anchor and stayed there. Thought it was all over again in 2000. And then in 2001, when people started flying airplanes into buildings, I was on the board of a company doing development in Africa. Had become very involved in Africa since the 80s, doing documentaries and television talking about Africa. Traveled to 10 countries there. Fell in love with Africa. I married a girl I'd met on a mission in Ethiopia. And we had our kids together, and we were married for 20 years. And so I got involved with Africa that way. Well, when September 11th happened, I didn't know what to do because that suddenly became irrelevant. And the only thing I knew to do was the news. And I called a friend of mine who was news director at the CBS radio station in Los Angeles and said, "Can you have some help? You need some help." And they said, "You'd come down here?" I said, "Hell yeah, what else am I gonna do?" And we were on the air for 24 hours straight. Won statues that are on my office wall. And they ultimately asked me the next day to anchor the news for them. So I stayed there for 8 years until...
Isn't it amazing how your career just kind of rolls?
Yeah.
When I say your career, it just means just careers in general. I never anticipated, it never even crossed my mind. For example, just this, hosting a radio show, or that was never a part of the cards, but opportunities just present themselves, and it's all right, that works.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of just what your goal has always been, it's about being of service and always kind of being an arbiter and a researcher of the truth. Have you found that you prefer, you've been a press secretary, you've done, you've been a correspondent on national news, you've been an anchor, you've done radio. Have you found, or do you feel that there's one medium that you're oh my goodness, this is where I felt like I was totally at one with everything that I'm supposed to be and everything that I'm supposed to be sharing with the world?
Well, television was definitely that, and at that time, and I always think that my time in television was the perfect time to be in television, and
because people still watched television
and believe. We didn't have any ambiguity about what facts were. And we sought facts. We didn't get involved in the mess of information salad that has been generated by what you would think would be an invaluable tool, the internet.
Information salad, I like that.
Yeah, and it's to the point where I don't know where my place would be in media today, where I could accomplish what I would think media need to accomplish for us. And there's a desperate need for that vehicle to emerge.
Do you worry? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you worry now that, because I always think about the fact that this whole idea of fake news is now just a part of our lexicon. Do you worry that there's kind of no turning back from that?
I do. People... We began some time ago in this conversation talking about the dumbing down of America, which has been accomplished to an alarming extent today. Find somebody who reads. Find somebody who won't ask the question, how did Hillary Clinton get elected Secretary of State? Do they not know that Secretary of State is not an elected position? Are we that daft about who America is and what it's about?
And how it operates?
The importance in the world, in the history of humanity, of the success of this experiment we call America? Are you not in touch with that? Do you think it makes sense not to participate in this process, that you're being some kind of an arbiter of thought because you chose not to vote? You really think that? Well, it's thinking like that has brought us to where we are today. It's the willingness to accept anything at face value that has brought us to a place where rumor And conspiracy theories are as valuable in the marketplace of ideas as true thought, as real research, as demonstrable fact.
Mm-hmm.
And now people are making decisions about the future whose impact will last generations, not just in their communities, but around the world, because the world has become so much smaller, based upon false information. Now, the coining of the term fake news, or the misuse of the term fake news,
Mm-hmm.
is one of the greatest travesties, I think, to take place in our lifetime, because it has caused us to distrust things which deserve to be trusted, and to trust things that do not deserve trust, because
Mm-hmm.
it's all the same. People always, choose not to participate because they say all politicians are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me, they are not. Now, many of them fall victim to the same temptations and motivations that are popular at the time and that help them perpetuate their jobs and so forth and so on, but that doesn't make them all the same. Jim Clyburn, for example, has been a congressman for longer than you've been alive, probably, is one of the finest statesmen that the Congress has ever seen. You don't want to term limit him out of existence, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there are any number of dedicated, committed, ethically sound, properly motivated individuals who sacrificially serve us at our whim, who deserve to be there for a lifetime if we get lucky enough to have them there. But because we have this attitude that's, well, they've been in there too long, and so whose watch are you looking at?
Right.
Okay. What was the term? The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's long, which means if 4 years is too long for you to stay in Congress, then you'll never get to justice if you're doing the right thing. You follow? I mean, we look at things, and many politicians look at planning for the future of our culture, of our society, of our democracy, based upon a 2-year cycle, or a 4-year cycle, or a 6-year cycle. The Native Americans, who were here before any of us, think on the basis of a 1,500-year cycle. The Chinese think of their future on the basis of a 2,500-year cycle. So who's got the deeper thought process? Okay? Who spends time? I mean, who spends the time thinking about things that can affect us today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow? And we tend to disrespect those kind of thought leaders. We really do. Because, and that was part of the frustration of always being in television, because you got to tell a story in 2 minutes.
Right.
Or a minute 15 seconds, or a minute 30. And the complaint would always be, this is too deep for a minute 30. Anyway, it's too deep. I'll do the best you can. Okay, fine, I'll do the best I can. But next quarter, can I do a series on it? Because this is big stuff. Okay?
Totally.
All right.
Totally. Oh my God.
And we're allergic to long form information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even the best of our representatives feel confronted with the challenge of having to dumb down the most significant issues of our time into soundbite.
Into a great soundbite. Yeah, exactly.
Trying to make everything black and white instead of the 500 shades of gray that are really part of the reality, because they think we can't process them. Totally. And when we get out of the habit of doing things like reading, we get to the point where we are unable to process complex issues.
I understand wholeheartedly, and I guess appropriately and ironically, I must tell you that we're actually out of time.
I can bore you all about this.
This has been so wonderful. Tell me, do you only have like a minute or so? Just tell me, what are you working on now? You're no longer in Los Angeles. You moved into a new phase of your career. You've been in Vegas for the last 9 years. What do we have? I mean, I know there's not a lot going on just because of where we are in the world right now, but what do we have happening or popping or in bubbling up now?
couple of what I consider to be legacy projects. One is uniquely about Las Vegas. It's called the Las Vegas World Jazz Festival, which we've conceived as the most significant and prestigious jazz event anywhere in the world on any given year.
Okay.
Driven entirely by media, but built around the concept that America's unique art form needs to be celebrated, preserved, and yes, marketed in a way that it's never been before. And making Las Vegas the headquarters of the world's jazz by creating the American Jazz Hall of Fame here and the annual Las Vegas World Jazz Festival, for which you will have to dress, but where we will really redesign the global market for retail jazz around the world. That's one of the reasons I moved here, was to pursue that goal. The second is another legacy project. I've become involved with a company whose global senior vice president is here in Las Vegas, called U.S. Green Infrastructure Solutions. Wrap your head around this for a moment. Two of the most important issues facing man today is the disposal of waste. The oceans are now fouled with plastics and with garbage that has been thrown off of every continent of the world to the point where species are becoming extinct because they have been forced to consume man's garbage. The atmosphere has become polluted to the point where global warming is taking place as the price of our energy consumption. This company, U.S. Green Infrastructure Solutions, has come up with a proprietary and absolutely unique technology that converts man's waste into energy without any carbon footprint whatsoever, to the point where for every 500,000 metric tons of waste, you can convert that into 240 megawatt hours of power. So what USGIS is doing, it is going into first the third world, and even now into major facilities in some of our biggest cities, and taking that waste product and transforming it into power. City of Gardena in Southern California is using it. One of the largest production and entertainment complexes on the planet is currently using this technology and has gotten off the grid and is using its own garbage to generate its own energy.
Wow.
So where, we see that disease has been spawned by our inability to dispose of our garbage. We see where cities like Monrovia, Liberia, can only collect 53% of the garbage created by 1.5 million people. And then they plant it in landfills, which become toxic to the entire community, where a USGIS waste to energy plant could supply power for the entire country based upon the garbage that's generated in the city of Monrovia alone, creating jobs, opening free space, reducing the burden of pollution both in the ground, in the water, and in the air. I believe that this technology can and will change the world. So I've become involved with U.S. Green Infrastructure Solutions, helping to move that technology through the United States as well as around the world in a number of territories where my firm has territorial rights. And it's an exciting new frontier. People wonder, how are we going to solve these problems? Bill Gates went and spent $200 million trying to find a way to eliminate the need for sewers in places where people were becoming ill and babies were dying because of diarrhea because the water's all infected with fecal material. Well, he spent $200 million to address that part of the problem. USGIS has devoted a similar amount of money and technical expertise and talent, which really has impressed me, to address this other side of the problem. And I really look forward to that being the thing where, people will say, oh yeah, I'm too old. I never got to see Larry Carroll on television. And it didn't affect my life. If we can clean up garbage on the planet, if we can eliminate the deposit of single-use plastics into the ocean, for example, plastic bags, which kill sea otters and sea lions,
Mm-hmm.
at the poles, for example, and at the same time generate power that doesn't have nuclear outfall, does not have black smoke from coal-fired plants, that doesn't require fossil fuels. Oh my God, we've now done something.
I think that's
So
wonderful. I
it's
think that's
an amazing,
wonderful.
amazing thing.
Well, you have to send me some info, and I'll definitely be sure that we can put it up when we go live, and let people know where to find you and where to find this technology. And I hate to cut you off because I'm having such a wonderful time.
I understand.
Well, I know that Vegas is like all reopened, but I'm still hiding under a rock. But once I feel safe, we'll have to get together again. Keep the conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been so wonderful. It's been wonderful talking to Larry Carroll, changing the world since 19. Yeah. It's been I've had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.